Sounds great.
Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. Today, my friends, I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Self-Love himself, Armon Anderson. Now, if that name doesn't ring a bell, you're about to get to know more about this incredible human being, but self-love has never been more important than right now. This incredible human has written a book, a term that if you're watching the video right now, it's called Selflovology. And if you're listening and if you've never heard of that term before, it's a pretty clever term. But Armon Anderson himself is a motivational speaker, thought leader, life and relationship coach. He's got a massive following on Instagram and TikTok as well. Some things that I don't actually have. He's a relationship coach, author. His newest book, Selflovology, Your Journey to Self-Love Starts Here, chronicles his own personal journey of healing his past and working towards living a meaningful and abundant life. Armon shares honestly and openly about his most intimate and formative experiences that led him towards the path he now inspires others to walk, the path towards self-love. Armon, can I welcome you so much to the Storybox podcast today, man?
I'm honored, Jay. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you here, man. We've been conversing back and forth on social media. I had to apologize before for having to reschedule our original meeting because of sickness, but I wouldn't have missed this conversation for the world. I'm glad that you're here, man. I really believe in your message. I think it needs to be spread far and wide. My very first question, if you have listened to my show, which I'm pretty sure you have, what does success look like for you?
That's a great question. I would say success to me would be living out my purpose, understanding that, and it took me many, many trials and tribulations to understand this, but that my purpose eventually, I gained clarity that it was much bigger than myself.
Mm.
And, I think God would want me to live out my purpose for the sake of helping humanity. And I feel like if I got to the end of my life, I don't know if you ever heard this analogy where God will show you two videos, the life you lived and the life that he wanted you to live.
Mm.
I would like to see the one that he wanted me to live and have it look just like the one that I chose to live myself. And so that's ultimately success to me is living out my purpose for the sake of humanity while I'm here.
Where did you discover your purpose? Like, did it just come to you randomly one day, or has it been like this evolving journey over time that you're sort of like, okay, I feel like this is my purpose, but I'm not 100% sure?
Oh no, Jay, trials and many trials.
As it usually is. Tell me about them.
I was watching a video of Will Smith and he was talking about that everything is on the other side of fear and your biggest tests in life. And I watched this a couple minutes ago and I couldn't agree more because did I ever think my pain would turn into a book? Never. Did I ever think the moments that I was, crying and I went through a physically abusive relationship would lead me to becoming Mr. Self-Love? I would tell you there's no way that would ever happen because prior to Mr. Self-Love, I was an entrepreneur for 17, 18 years and nothing to do with self-love. I didn't even know what self-love was. But it was a lot of pain that I went through that eventually made me realize, Jay, that I wasn't alone. And that if I figured out how, it wasn't easy, but if I figured out how to be vulnerable, I possibly would have met people like me who were thankful that I spoke up so that they could do the same.
So let's dive into your story. So you mentioned there that you went through a physically abusive relationship. So can you share firstly what actually happened? I want to go deep straight away. So what actually happened in that relationship?
Yeah. Everything stems from the root. And sometimes we don't consciously think that something starts from maybe childhood, right? Because we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s. And for me, I saw my mother be codependent, trying to save my father. And when you're a child or a teen, you don't realize that you're going to likely do the same and then have to figure it out for yourself of where it came from, where the behavior stemmed from. And so I met this woman, and basically from the get-go, realize that it was not healthy. But Jay, I was 100% certain that God put me here to save her.
Oh my goodness. This is feeling all too familiar. Continue.
Yeah, I thought that was my life purpose. And I dedicated literally my everything to the point of losing myself and feeling like no matter, what I said or did, even if I failed, eventually I would strike a chord with her and she would heal. And it went down a road of dysfunction, drama, physical abuse, and sharing that as a man is difficult today, let alone when I first started sharing what I went through, because you really don't hear men as much talk about it as women do. And I got to the point where it's actually in Selflovology. It was probably the most terrifying moment of my life that ironically led to my breakthrough, which was being in a car, arm bleeding, being hit, and almost like a Lifetime movie. I'm not sure, Jay, if you have a Lifetime TV channel in Australia, but typically they're pretty intense movies. And I looked at myself, and although she was hitting me really, really hard in a very tiny car, everything slowed down for about 60 seconds. And like a voice came to me and said, Armon, this is not about her. And the voice said, not only this is not about her, there's something inside of you that chose her from day one and then allowed her to do this to you. And all you got to do is walk away. And if I told you how many people told me across 13 months that I deserve better, that it was unhealthy, I went to the hospital probably 6 times with panic attacks. I never even knew, Jay, what a panic attack was up until that relationship. But what I learned through that is not only could people, my mother, my sister, my friends, they couldn't rob the experience I needed to break through, that it was necessary. And it's kind of weird, right, to say that some of these things are necessary to get to breakthrough. But if someone took away that 13 months in my life, I legitimately may never have found my life purpose. So it carries weight that in the moment you don't see, but after the fact, you realize that pain could actually be growth.
Now, talking about the breakthrough, I wanted to sort of ask you, have you forgiven her? Because there's 2 kind of breakthroughs you can have. The first one is realizing that you need to leave. And then the second breakthrough is realizing that you should, I guess, forgive in order to let go and then move on. So did you have 2 breakthroughs in that respect? And have you actually forgiven her?
Yeah, absolutely. The distinction was, it wasn't about me. And sometimes we make somebody else's unhealed wounds about ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we hold on, even if someone passes away or we've been separated for 10, 20 years, we're still holding on to what was their behavior, not ours. And so immediately, once I understood the distinction, it was wishing her well, wishing, healing and love for herself, first and foremost, and then for maybe the next person that she was going to be in a relationship with. And she would tell the story that, yes, she treated someone in a negative way, but learned from it and is better because of it. And so that was kind of the first distinction. The second was gratitude. And I know you might be thinking to yourself, how in the world?
Yes.
But the gratitude was that it became a blessing in my life that, I'm now doing what I believe is what God put me here to do. And without her, maybe that wouldn't be the case.
Did that relationship, did that impact the way you saw yourself as a man?
Yeah, that's a deep one, Jay. I know you go there. I'm excited.
Let's go there, brother. Let's do it.
Yeah, I don't think you get much lower than being in a corner and you're kind of ducking and covering and never hitting back and just taking it, right? And when you're in that vulnerable space, there's not much lower you can go. And so after that relationship, I really had to heal, and that was its own journey, to understand that I never have to go through that again. But unless I never want that to happen again, I must heal what got me there in the first place.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think the healing is in the next relationship. And so we just say, how can I move on, or who's going to love me? But I realized that in life, we don't get what we want or deserve. We attract the person we're willing to become.
Mm.
And I had to become before I could attract.
So why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you really defend yourself or lash out? Because that's sort of an uncommon thing for a man, so to speak, that is getting absolutely hammered by just anyone in particular. The natural response is, okay, I'm going to lash out. So why didn't you?
Just never in my nature.
Yeah.
I never saw violence in my life. My father, he left when I was 12, but never violent, nothing like that. And so um, just not in my DNA. Unfortunately, what was in my DNA was to help fix and save someone who was in that state.
Yeah.
And once I learned that, and I kind of went back, I read a book by Melody Beattie called "Codependent No More," and that whole book is about saving yourself and learning how to not control anybody else for the sake that you literally cannot and should not. And so I learned to let go of any expectation. If someone's going to cheat, they're going to cheat. If someone's going to be dysfunctional, they're going to be dysfunctional. The main ingredient is believing them when they show you who they are, and understand that your boundaries can prevent you from ever experiencing that more than once.
And don't worry, for those people that are listening, I would never hit a woman. I've never hit a woman before. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in violence. I'm a passive person. I was raised the same way I believe you are. It's not in my nature to lash out or hit back, but I'm just curious, like when you're in that moment of sheer pain, like, did you ever have that moment of, I want to end this? Like, I want to stop her. I want to grab her hands right now and just stop the abuse that's happening to me.
No, believe it or not, I would run. And I learned that when I would run, she would chase. And so if I was running out of the apartment to my car, I made sure to lock the car as soon as I got in. But because I was unhealed in my own right, I would drive an hour home, and where was I? 8 a.m. Then I was right back there.
Wow, man. So can you tell me, after you left that relationship, what was the work like? How long did it actually take you to dive into understanding that you are worth something, you are worthy of love? That relationship does not define you. Can you share how long that journey actually took you to finding who you actually are?
Yeah, the first thing I focused on was kind of putting the pieces that seemed like they were all over the place as to why I became that way, and believed in my belief system that that was okay.
Mm.
Right? Because I always say, if you don't know your self-worth, you will date somebody who will remind you of that, for better or worse, right? And so as soon as that relationship ended, it was, is there really anybody in the world, even the greatest human being, is there anybody who will ever love me like I can love myself?
Mm.
And I found out that's not going to be the case. Like, I can love myself the greatest that anybody in the world can. And if I truly believe that and take the time to strengthen my self-worth and my self-love, then from there, I will never allow anything like I used to in my life. And it was more so about me. But when you don't focus on yourself, you tend to blame somebody else for why your circumstance is the way it is.
Which is the natural and easy response, is to blame. Don't worry, I've been there many, many times.
It feels good temporarily.
It does feel good. Like, you're passing the blame onto somebody else. It's like, kind of like, I want this pain that I'm experiencing to go to someone else. Like, I don't want to have to deal with it, so I just reflect it. I want them to deal with it because it's their fault, not mine. And it's that fear of doing the work and diving into that. And I've been there many times. Like, I was in an emotionally abusive, it wasn't physically abusive, it was emotionally abusive relationship for quite some time, but I felt like I did the stupid thing of putting my entire worth, my entire being. I was like, I love you to the end of time. I'm going to do whatever it takes, but the emotional abuse just kept creeping up. I just kept feeling and being pushed down, pressured, you name it. And then when it all sort of shattered and ended, I shattered along with it. And then it was this crazy long period of time that I blamed her. Everything that she said to me, everything she did, it was all her fault, wasn't anything to do with me. And I had to realize, no, it's not her fault. She has her own journey to deal with. I've got my own journey right now to deal with in finding who I really am. And that took a bit of time, man. Like, I'm not going to lie. So I want to ask you, for someone that is in a relationship right now and it is abusive, it is kind of crazy, and they don't really understand, they don't really know that they are worth something. They don't know it. What advice would you give to them?
Well, ironically, and this is no accident, I watched your video a few minutes before we started this, and you talked about not asking God why, but what is this teaching me?
Mm,
And that was so powerful, Jay, because it's the same thing answering this question, which is, what is this teaching me about myself? Like, if I love myself, would I even tolerate this for 2 seconds? Right. And when you introspect, right, you look within yourself, it's so much greater. Right. It took me many years, probably almost 2.5 decades to learn this. But best thing I learned was, what is this teaching me? Right. What is it about me that is tolerating this? Because you don't have to. Right. And I know for some people listening to this, they're going to think to themselves, maybe financially, they need to get to a better place to remove themselves. Right. Everyone's in a different state, but it always starts with the self. It's kind of a cliche, but it's self-love, not their love.
mm,
And one thing I find in many of my clients is how often we hold on to the negative things said to us in a previous relationship, and we believe them to be true, and it becomes your self-image.
mm,
Right. And then you carry that self-image with you into the next relationship, where you know we either attract the same type of relationship, or this new person who had nothing to do with our past, they don't see us the way we see ourselves, but eventually as they get to know us, will identify that we never healed from the past.
mm. Or we get desperate. We get desperate. The fact that no one is ever going to love me again, like the person supposedly did before.
Which is, I'm glad you put connotations around
Yeah.
this supposed, because what you said is so true. Becoming desperate and saying, who is going to love me? Who's the next person who's going to love me? But if you really sat back and asked yourself, did you really experience healthy love in
Mm,
your past? The answer would be no. So, in fact, we should probably be thankful and grateful that now we have the opportunity to heal and become healthy so we can attract healthy love.
mm. What is healthy love?
I learned this from a mentor of mine who became also a best friend of mine, and very healthy relationship, healthy marriage. And it takes work, and they put in the time to make sure it's that way. Um, and he always said, number one was trust. Number two is communication. Number three is respect. And he said, if one falters, all of a sudden the entire relationship crumbles. And so I heard this when I was 18 and didn't take it to heart, obviously, because I went through that relationship. But eventually I took it to heart and I understood it this way. Um, Again, I think Will Smith has a video where he says, you're either going to find me on the top of the mountain or dead on the side, but I'm not coming back.
Mm,
And I kind of use that analogy in my current relationship with my fiance, Linda, which is what we talked about day one, which is she's going to love herself and always focus on her self love and her growth. I'm going to do the same individually.
mm,
And because of that, we'll have the ability to have a healthy relationship and treat one another with the love and respect we gave to the individual self. And if we don't do that, we will come together and have an honest conversation. And the relationship will be no more.
Mm.
But we kind of had that, not a rule, but kind of a fine line that she cannot cross the boundary for me, and I cannot cross the boundary simply to date her.
Mm. I've always been curious about building trust within relationships. It's something that I have honestly struggled with over the course of my journey. Now, I'm only 24, so I'm still young. I'm still learning, which I absolutely love. And I love learning from people that have been down this journey for themselves and they've sort of experienced broken trust in the past, and then how they've been able to regain, I guess, a sense of trust and worth and all that sort of stuff in their life. So, can you help me and for those people that are listening understand how we can build the right kind of trust back when that trust has been broken? Is that actually possible?
Yeah, I actually went through this in a really dark way. I used to be very insecure, jealous, back when you could even see who your significant other was liking pictures on Instagram. They changed that
Oh,
probably
no.
for because of me.
And me too. One and the same.
And I I ultimately realized that the more jealous I became and the more insecure, it was damage to myself, but more so I kept pushing my girlfriend at the time away.
Mm,
And having been cheated on before, and also having, caught my father doing the same thing with my mother,
geez.
trust, you start to look at trust a little bit differently, that no one is honest, even if they act a certain way for a long period of time. In your mind, one day it's going to happen. That was my
Mm,
mentality. And the way I kind of went to the other side was realizing that I could not take my past experience or someone else's identity and place it on somebody new. And the freedom, and when I say freedom, I mean probably one of the best feelings of my life, coming from being insecure and jealous, is realizing that what someone's going to do, like if I allow her to live her life, I'm actually going to see what she would rather do.
mm,
If I control her, I'm not going to see what she would rather do. She's going to do what I want her to do. And so I learned to embrace and almost fall in love with completely unattaching and being secure within myself. And if something happened that was not in my belief system anymore, then I would let it go.
mm.
And that's what I would recommend to everybody: is the more you let go, you will see what they will rather do, and that should tell you what you really need to know, for better or worse.
Yeah, but Armon, it's so hard to let go. How can I let go easier? Is that actually possible to let go a lot easier, or is it just like this constant, difficult journey of getting to the place where we can actually let go?
All it comes down to is the story you keep telling yourself.
Mhm.
and that's, it kind of hits home, right? Even saying this, it hits home for me, because you tell yourself a story enough times, you believe it. And
Yeah.
some people believe the same story for the rest of their life. And I'd encourage everybody to be open-minded, because sometimes we think we need to go to a seminar, or we need to read a million books, or we need all these things. But it's the action, it's the first step that's going to make all the difference. And deciding to tell yourself a story, just like we told ourselves a story to begin with, and you say, look, right, I'm going to create a new story, and start to believe it, that this person is not who I used to date or who I used to know. And let's just
Mm.
eliminate control, and go from here.
I have what do I call it? It's I call it the cap method. It's kind of like this mentality that I came up with after I actually went through a dark period. Funny enough, how I actually came up with this, which quite often is the case. The cap method basically enables people to understand, firstly, that it's their choice. So it's getting to the place of letting go and all that sort of stuff, becoming better. So understand, but a lot of people do this in their life. They make the choice to accept, and they persistently tell themselves that same narrative over and over and over again in their head. and it beats them down to a point where they get stuck, they get depressed, they get lonely, they get anxious, they suffer panic attacks. You know how I know this? I've been there. I've experienced it. So I know it 100% to be true. And if I've experienced it, guaranteed so many other people experience it too. So how do we reverse engineer this? Well, basically, I say it like you have to understand that it is your choice to be stuck where you currently are. You are accepting this place to be the exact place that you want to be for the rest of your life. But you've got to persistently tell yourself that I shouldn't be stuck there. I can do the work now every single day moving forward to become better. And it's putting a literal cap on all the negative and saying, I'm going to persistently keep tightening that cap every single day and not allowing it to loosen, because the moment it gets loosened, then there is possibility there for the negatives to come back out. And then I start this whole journey of once again accepting the negative into my life. So it's this process. I understand. I completely relate to most of your story, Armon, but I thought I would share that example. And I write about it as well in my book, and I explain it in further detail. I go into like different stories and how it relates to choice, how it relates to acceptance, and how we can officially use it in your life to become a better human being. One thing that I like about in your book, Selflovology, is you talk about choosing the choice factor there, betterness, not bitterness. Can you share how you came up with that?
Yeah, it's 12 years old, Jay. My father had just left. And the next evening, I was bitter. I mean, this guy, he was an amazing father. He'd come home from work at 10 at night. I'd be in front of the garage. I mean, watch Laker games together. It was just my idol, right? And when he didn't come home, and I think in the book I say that I didn't hear the garage open forever. I ultimately go to my closet to put a shirt away, and I see a case of beer on the ground. And when I look at it, I realize when he was drinking one night, he probably thought my closet was the kitchen and misplaced it. And I go to pick it up to drink it. And as I got close to, actually having the beer go in my mouth, I had a spitting image of my daughter and my son. I was 32, and my daughter looks at me and she says, "Dad, are you going to choose betterness or bitterness?" And I said, "What's the difference?" Mm-hmm. And she says, "Well, bitterness is doing what he did. It's always going to be the easier decision, retaliating and things like that." I said, "Well, what's betterness look like?" And she said, "Well, betterness will always be the more difficult decision in your life, but it will always lead you to better." And in that moment, I put the can of beer down and literally looked at this. I don't even know what kind of moment you want to call it, but this moment. And I decided to not only put that down, but never drink in my life. And so, having said that and making a decision at 12 and being an entrepreneur, you're around alcohol, drugs, and everything else, right? In some certain settings.
Yeah.
But I learned at 12, and I didn't know this at the beginning, the power of a decision and how it can impact your life. Because even my beautiful mother, she would say, "Armon, go to these parties. How come you're home on a Friday night? You should go, for God's sakes, bring a girl home and kiss her, because you don't bring girls home either." You know what I mean? And she would say, "Go do these things." But I hadn't told her that at 12 years old. As I got older, I had that moment, and I took that moment to many aspects of my life, Jay, of when things happen out of my control, especially to not react and kind of sit with it and choose betterness, because bitterness ultimately will delay me from my purpose in life, my happiness, my physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health. And it's a fine line. And, you and I were talking earlier, there's some things that have happened in my life that it's so easy to go down the road of being bitter when someone has done you wrong, they've hurt you, they've stolen from you. But at what cost, if you go pay attention to that bitterness, right? What does it take you away from? And for me, I continue to not want bitterness, which happens in my life. People, I think social media can be a trap. People don't think I go through some things that they go through sometimes because, you're a coach or author, whatever the case may be. I tell them every single day that even my relationship with Linda, it's beautiful, it's healthy, but there's no such thing as perfect.
Mm,
It's just progress.
mm. I say that as well, man. This is powerful, and also bitterness leads to hate, and hate leads to unforgiveness, resentment, you name it. All these terrible, terrible things that we should never allow into our life, that we just become like the worst kind of person on the planet that no one wants to really associate with. And I mean, we see it kind of in movies. Like you see the person that has been through absolute hell and they've chosen to resent, I guess, that experience and what that does to them. It eats them up. And I like how you mentioned the alcohol, because a lot of people turn to the drink. They think because they're masking the pain. I don't want to deal with the pain. I don't want to face up to it. The pain sucks. Leave me alone. I'm going to drown my sorrows. It's that sort of mindset. And I can understand, man. Like, I've never had a drink of alcohol in my life, never smoked, never done anything like that. I never went out to parties, never went out clubbing. And people would ask me all the time, they'd be like, why aren't you going out and doing all that sort of stuff? Why aren't you going and finding girls and doing sort of like, quote unquote, the normal thing in society? And I said, I don't feel like it's my place to be there. I felt out of place in many respects. And I think I looked at where that sort of lifestyle took. It was sort of like this satisfying thing, but it wasn't fulfilling. I think people are chasing satisfaction rather than fulfillment. So that's when I realized that quite young, actually. And then secondly, because of my health, I couldn't. So I had two things that I was actually choosing in my life, and I've committed to it. So I love that, man. Like it's such a good. It's so wise.
Yeah, are we brothers?
We must be, man. We're brothers from another mother. It's like I'm feeling a story, man. And as I was reading your book, I'm like, did he steal my story or what? But it goes back to, once again, as we're talking about, that relatability factor, that we're not alone, man. We're not alone. So you were actually, we were talking about it before, you were bullied as well. Why were you bullied, man? If people look at you and look at the handsome devil that you are on the cover, why were people bullying you?
It goes back to what you just talked about. I didn't even go to parties, but as soon as one of my good friends kind of went from living a sober life to partying, all of a sudden a group of guys started to bully me because I wasn't willing to do the same.
Oh, yes.
And Jay, I remember vividly, I was in my junior year of high school and going to the bathroom stall, and I'm in the middle of two other guys, and we're all standing and peeing, and they like move forward and they look at each other, and the guy says, "Do you know Armon is going to get his, what, kicked in about like 15 minutes?" And I'm about 6'2". I'm really skinny. I've always been skinny. So me protecting myself with guys who are twice my size, forget about it. It was not going to happen. I would just take it and call it a day. And so hearing that was just intimidating, right? To begin with. And I had everything, like my tires slashed and, many different things, to eventually I was too afraid to go to school and I became homeschooled. And my mother forced me into my senior year at a new high school because she wanted me to experience my senior year. But what I always knew ultimately was there was a good chance one day they would heal and they would actually apologize. And it happened. About 4 years later, I get a knock on my door, and the main person who orchestrated the bullying said that due to being on drugs and in a bad place, he bullied me, and that he apologized. And now we communicate to this day. So it's just, again, going back to betterness over bitterness. Even though my life was kind of being threatened to some degree, I knew that it really wasn't them, because I do believe there's good-hearted people that, like, at that time, maybe they just didn't have a family dynamic,
Mm.
and they have unresolved pain, and they just take it out on me. And so, thankfully, again, I removed myself, new high school, and years later, it was another message to me that it wasn't about me, and betterness was the right idea again.
What's that old saying? Hurt people hurt people. It's very true. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that, man. Like, I'm sorry that you had to experience all this. But in saying all that, you are the man that you are today because of it. So, in that respect, like, do you think that if you had an opportunity to sort of start over in your life, that if you knew all this, do you think that you would repeat it?
I'm gonna turn that question and ask you a second follow up. Ready?
Yep.
I would say, Jay, if someone gave you $1 million cash today, but you had to have a clean slate, right? New set of parents, all the relationship toxic drama gone, and you start over, and you'd have all the money in the world, restarting your life, would you do it?
No. Not for
And if
all
I
the
said,
money in the
Jay,
world.
if I gave you $10 million cash now instead of one, would you do it?
Not for all the money in the world, man. No way.
And how's that answer for all the times we're like, like, my life sucks, or I hate myself, I hate my life, I'm not worthy, yet you just in front of everybody said 10 million, you could give me 100 million and I'd still want to be Jay.
Doesn't matter how much money you give me. You know why? Because how quickly would money leave? How quickly would you spend it? How much would you value money? Sure, money is good in the short term, but long term, who would you be if you actually spent $1 million in one day? Like, that would go so quick. Like, there would be no actual substance to being a human being if you don't go through pain, challenges, you name it. You become a better person because of it. And I think I was talking about it in the video, not to sort of bring that up again, but it's kind of like, why do we suffer? We suffer because it builds us up. As much as we hate it, as much as we don't want to, we suffer because you're going to increase your strength. And that experience you can then take, and I say this as well, it creates a great story too. Like, and without stories, you can't really, you would cease to exist. Like, there'd be no substance to life. It'd be very boring and mundane. Like, so I'm curious, what would you do? Would you do the same thing?
Yeah, it's not even a question.
It's a dumb question. That is like
a dumb question.
Yeah.
Because it's like we don't go see a movie, Jay, and go to see a movie because there's no climax. Like, there's always a point where you hold your breath and you're like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And you've interviewed some of the world-renowned actors and actresses in the world. And when I've seen their movies, it's like, you need a little bit of the dysfunction and drama, and then there's the other side, right? Whatever happens at the end. And when it gets to the end, you kind of have a relief, and you're like, whew, right? I went through this 2-hour movie, and now, right, here's the end. And I think all of us have that. And that's why I love what you've created. And I can't believe you're 24, because just for you to be vulnerable with your story and create a platform like this for people to unbox their own, knowing the importance of what you said, which is like the essence of life is truly storytelling. It just says so much about you. And I'm so grateful that we've been connected. Truly grateful.
Likewise, man. And I feel like we're going to have many great conversations to come, 100%. I have a few more questions for you, man, because I know your time is valuable.
I'm ready
So
for them.
you talk about finding faith in your book, which I think is quite important. Now, tell me about loving your kind of faith. How can we learn to love the faith that we have if we do actually have it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in the book I talk about placing your faith somewhere,
Mm,
and for everybody it's different, right? It's not the same. And for me, I grew up Christian father, Muslim mother, but
wow.
either one of them not really um, practicing fully, right? And so as I grew up, 18 years old, first relationship, I date this girl and her family's big into church. They were Christian, right? And the almost the fear I had of going, because if you weren't raised in it, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm,
And so I really think you'll find this interesting from watching your videos, because I go to church at 18. My mom's telling me what I'm going to expect, which wasn't the case, right? Because she doesn't know what she doesn't know. And I I hear a message that I really needed to hear at the time. He had taken this story from the Bible, related it to real life,
mm,
and I just sat there kind of like, wow, like how did I miss out on this my whole life? But then something interesting happened where on Monday I saw my girlfriend at the time and everyone that was at church, and they're drinking, doing drugs, and then back on Sunday again.
uh-huh,
So it put me in a place where I'm like, well, what is this about? We're preaching this and then doing this.
mm,
But that was part of my own growth of getting older and wiser and realizing that it's it's us who need to heal and are broken, that need to get closer to faith. And again, wherever you place your faith, right? Everyone's places their faith in a different place. But that first moment of going to church for the first time, not having ever gone to any, temple, mosque, church, what have you, um, it taught me about the power of showing up.
mm,
And again, I understand everyone places faith in a different place, but for me, the more I kept going to church, and I've gone to temples, I've open minded to like everything, just because I'm a learner and I always learn. Um, I just realized that it was always a message that I needed to hear at that point in my life that served me and then served somebody else because I showed up.
mm,
And so I would just say, in other words, show up for yourself for where you place your faith.
mm,
Um, and if I had to define faith, um, it's just like anything in my life. Your vision in life, it's the unseen. It's why most people do not understand why we do what we do. And in my life, I just, moving forward, especially, I create a hologram in my mind. And I realize that the image I create for my life is not in the physical, it's in the spiritual. But if I revisit that image in my mind every day, it will come to the physical. And Jay, as I'm sure you know, as an entrepreneur, then everyone says when it comes into the physical world, Jay, I knew you could do it.
mm.
Jay, you're incredible. But they don't see that you had to see it before it ever was in the physical world, and have faith.
It's I talk about having a vision and a mission behind what you do. So if you don't actually have it, then you actually, when the struggles do come, you won't go back to that commitment that you made with the vision and the mission. So if you actually get stuck oftentimes when you're not grounded in something, it's kind of like you're, and this is what happens in a lot of churches. They're sort of going there to appease their parents, or it's not real for them. So they go with the flow. They go with the chaff of the wind, right? So they just like they blow away when things sort of get difficult for them.
Yeah.
There's no real grounding in solid rock. There's no anchor that they're setting themselves in. It's sort of like, I'm on sand. I'm gonna sink every now and then. I'm gonna, move around with the flow, and I don't want to be outcast or ostracized as being someone that's different. Um, that's what happens to a lot of people. And you kind of like, and no one wants to feel alone. No one wants to feel like they're left out. But there's a lot of groups I've noticed in churches in particular that sort of have those clicky groups that they're just like very much tight, and they're very cautious with letting someone new in. And that's not what God was about. He said, love everybody. Don't go and create these clicky groups. I believe this. And if you don't believe me, then I'm going to kick you out of the group. It's like, that's not God's message at all. He said, I have called you to love the unlovable. What does that mean? Love your enemy. Oh, geez, I got to love my enemy. What does that mean? He's asking us to do the hard thing, but he knows as human beings, that's going to be one heck of a struggle. But if we really rely on him, and I was speaking to someone the other day about hoping in him and having the faith to believe that when things do get difficult, when you do struggle to love somebody that is hard to love, then you ask God for strength. You ask him to show up in your life. He's always going to do it, but it will be in his time, not always our time. We get impatient and we say, I've got this massive affliction in my life. Take it out. I don't want it. God, it's so difficult to love this person. And he just keeps saying, keep believing in me, keep showing up, no matter how long it takes. And God will have the final say. It won't be us. It'll be him. So I thought I'd share that.
No, it's powerful. It kind of brought a vision to my mind of why a puzzle isn't created within like 2 minutes, and it's all over the place, and it's in its own time. But then the moment where you find that like last piece, and you're like, oh, like there it is. And I think a lot of us need to find gratitude in that piece that we put, and it completes itself. And you're like, wow, I get it now. And sometimes we want to understand the message, way too early, because we don't want to go through the pain, right? But sometimes it is that pain and putting that puzzle together, and then you see this beautiful, right, finished art. And I think everyone's pain gets to a point where it's finished art, and then people get to look at it and change their own life, and which is your platform.
And it was created by the master himself. So why should we doubt? Why should we worry? But yet we do. It's part of being human. So go back to Armon's message. It's powerful. I have 2 final questions for you, man, if you don't mind. What do you love the most about yourself now?
Forgiveness. Yeah. I'd say forgiveness of the realization of what happened with my father. And I, at one point, had hives all over my body. I was so stressed, I fell out of my chair in a college class, Jay, and ambulance was in my face. And, I call stress the invisible enemy.
Yeah.
And we don't realize sometimes, what we think about, we bring about. And forgiveness for myself, and then, for other people that I've had, experiences with, I'd say was the biggest thing.
I love that, man. So this is my final question. You've probably heard it. It's my all-time favorite question. I ask everyone at the end. It's a hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument. It'd be one hell of a film. But they've been able to get it all and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
Honestly, Jay, I could see why you asked that, because I got emotional. My response would be to see the testimonials of other people throughout my life who were impacted by my work, and to see families together, to see people physically, emotionally healthy, to see people say they love themselves because they heard about Selflovology and it impacted the course of their life. They let go of the story they told themselves for years, and they attracted a healthy relationship and got to experience healthy love while they're living, which I think is the most beautiful thing about life, is experiencing healthy love. And I think that at 100, that'd probably be the greatest gift anyone could ever give me, is the testimonials of other people.
Perfect send-off message, man. Where can people find you, connect with you, buy your book, which is awesome, Selflovology? Go and get a copy. Where can they get it?
Thank you, Jay. So it's Mr. Selflove on social media, and then Selflovology is on Barnes & Noble and also Amazon worldwide.
Mr. Selflove, Armon Anderson, thank you so much for coming on the Storybox podcast, man.
Jay, thank you so much for today. I appreciate you so much.